this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Some things in life are just absolutely tedious. I love that. I love that word. Absolutely love that word, tedious. It's such an all-encompassing phrase. You know, it goes to, you know, taking a lot of time to do something, or the work that you're having to do is so overwhelming just by sheer numbers that boredom sets in, those sorts of things. And that happens a lot in investigations because you've got so much data coming in that you're trying to process it, and you're trying to, you know, hang your proverbial investigative and scientific hat on it. Sometimes it's hard to really mold it into something. It's almost like working with super wet clay. Today, I want to talk about a case that is tedious for many reasons. I think one of the elements of tedium that comes along with this is time. Another element is confusion. And I think finally, this idea of tedium is demonstrated through the fact that the perpetrator in this case has had over 80 charges filed against her. Oh, I forgot to mention something. She killed her girlfriend and chopped her up into little bits. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. You know, Dave, I don't think I could be an airline pilot. And this is, other than the fact I've got bad eyes, and listen, I will literally spend time on YouTube watching people land and take off. I'm fascinated by it, you know, where they go into these different locations around the world. You live through it vicariously. Yeah. And these people are incredible as far as I'm concerned, as far as technicians and all that stuff. But it is so incredibly tedious. Everything you have to do and check, and you want them to do it and check it. Trust me, as a passenger, I do, because of, I don't know, gravity. And so I want that to happen. But, you know, you see what they do, and, you know, how that kind of translates into a safe landing or a successful landing. When you have certain cases in forensics, it's kind of like that. You know, what boxes do you tick, as the Brits say? What boxes do you tick? Have you ticked all of the correct boxes? Are you paying attention to every bit of detail? In the case we have today, it really caught my eye because it's so involved in, oh my Lord, it took so long to come to a conclusion on.
You know, Nicole Alston went missing in 2007. Gone, just gone. And her mom didn't know where she was, you know, her loved ones didn't know where she was, but she's 24 years old. She's from New York City. And I was looking this over because I kept, you know, trying to figure out what was really going on. You talked about the tedious, and I thought there was a time when I was researching this that I went, wait a minute. Okay. We have Nicole Alston, whose family knows she's gone, but nobody else seems to know. And the reason is her girlfriend, Angel Thompson, who was also 24 at the time. She's 42 now. Angel Thompson had been living her life as Nicole Alston. And Nicole Alston still existed on paper. Nicole Alston was still getting food stamps. She was getting Social Security benefits. She was getting Section 8 housing. She was getting a lot of stuff. Nicole Alston was. So I guess her family just thought, well, maybe she just doesn't want to talk to us or something. There wasn't a big search, you know. But in 2007, the fire department was called in Troup County, Georgia, because there were these bags burning along a rural road. Now, I know you know Troup County, don't you?
Yes, I do. Hogansville in particular, yeah.
Can you tell me, okay, where is that in relation to Atlanta?
Yeah, people think, when they think Georgia, unfortunately, they think Atlanta, and Atlanta is not the sum total of all of Georgia. Georgia's a big place. It's one of the largest states east of the Mississippi. Matter of fact, fun fact, in the words of Paul Blart, fun fact, the most counties of any state east of the Mississippi, as a matter of fact, tiny counties. So lots and lots of them. Anyway, I digress.
Yes.
So if you go southwest of Atlanta along the I-85 corridor, like you're heading to Montgomery out of Atlanta, that's the area that we're talking about. And it's, Hogansville is probably, Atlanta traffic, who can measure that?
Yeah.
I'd say you're probably at least an hour and a half with Atlanta traffic on a good day to make it to Atlanta or back up around the airport. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then that gives us an idea of where we are. And if you continued on 85, you could end up in Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah, you could. And Auburn and all those other places in between.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, these bags were found on fire. Fire department comes out there and, of course, you put out a fire, but then they start looking in the bags, what's going on with these bags. And, what they found, the fire department found a chopped up body.
Yeah.
But this chopped up body was missing some important parts. Missing the head, the feet, the hands, all missing. So you've got parts of a body in two bags that are now burned. And that's it, Joe.
That's it.
And in 2007, I know that when we look back around 18 years ago, we'd come a long way with DNA. We'd come a long way with forensic testing and things, but not far enough.
No, not as far as we have today. We can put such a fine point on things today compared to, it was literally, and I can't believe I'm saying this, about 2007, it was literally a different world.
Right.
It truly was from a scientific perspective. It moves at light speed. My students at Jacksonville State, when I'm lecturing to them now, Dave, I'll frame things like, I feel so old. I feel like I ought to be sitting up on a mountain with a long gray beard and birds living in my beard. I'll say things like, you're going to behold wonders in forensic science that I could not even begin to imagine, moving on into the future. And just like back in 2007, there are things back then that I could not have visualized now in the world that we exist in now. And so we make leaps like that in all high-end scientific endeavor we do, or at least I think scientists and research scientists certainly hope that we do. But in this particular case, you had a lot to go on as far as a body, though it was, I don't know what's the word I could use, particulated. And it has suffered great heat-related trauma, obviously postmortem heat-related artifact. But yet, what do you literally, I always use this phrase, where are you going to hang your hat on? Because if you don't have a database to go to, all you know is that you can probably surmise, depending upon the pieces you have, you can surmise race. If you have a dark-skinned individual, you can take a shot at that. If you have any bony elements that are left behind, there are certain elements in our skeletal structure, like once you strip all of the tissue off of, which is hard to do with a burn case, unlike if you have somebody that just goes through standard decomposition, I say standard, right? I know there's standardized decomposition, but there really is. If you have a body that's just laid out on the ground and exposed to the elements, it's a lot easier to do, and they become skeletonized. It's a lot easier to do aging and that sort of thing on that. But
do you run into the same problem with, not problem, but with flies and things like that in burned remains that you would have in non-burned?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Flies can take certain things away, but they're not necessarily going to affect the skeletal remains. Now, what you could do, I think, and I know that you could, even with burn cases, you can still understand the life cycle of the insects from an entomological standpoint that are showing up, because they're at a predictable rate. We talk about the life cycle of insects showing up. So that data would still be viable. However, what it could be compromised are, say, for instance, you're talking about a victim here that is 24 years old. if you're missing certain elements, like you think about bone fusion, like when we hit adulthood, our bones stop growing. Well, some people hit it earlier, some people hit it later. And if you're missing certain elements, you think about, I think they're called the epiphyseal plates that, kind of fuse together. And at that point, you're not going to grow anymore. So if you're missing some of those elements, that can kind of throw you off. And here's the other thing. In the initial search in this case, Dave, they don't have a head. Now, that's problematic. And it's problematic if you're trying to identify somebody. I think probably the most striking thing for me is the teeth, because teeth are something that they tell such a tale about the person and their life. Most people don't think about what their teeth could literally be saying scientifically. We look for things like wear patterns on teeth, like what side, and I do this with my students as well. I'll say, okay, everybody close your eyes. When I teach my odontology section, close your eyes and take your tip of your tongue and run it across the surface of your teeth and try to determine what side of your mouth do you favor when you chew. Well, the lion's share of people, they favor the right side because there will be as much wear. Now, my teeth have a lot more wear than, say, an 18-year-old freshman student, but they get an idea, like the canine is no longer sharp. It's kind of worn down. Some people grind their teeth, but not just that, but you're thinking about the eruption of teeth. Even 12-year molars, have they erupted? Have they not erupted? You think about wisdom teeth. Are the wisdom teeth still there? Because if the wisdom teeth are still there, all right, then I can exclude everybody else in the world that has had their wisdom teeth extracted. And conversely, you can do the same thing. You can also learn a lot about their dentition as far as how well the body has been, or not the body, but how well they took care of themselves in life. Do you have restorations? Do you have cavitated areas in the teeth? All those sorts of things come into play. So you're missing a head. That's one of the biggest elements here. And isn't it interesting, Dave, that they took the hands off? What was your thought about that when you saw that? I mean, I got to ask you, what was your first inclination there? My
thing was, why the feet? I get the hands and I get the head from an identification standpoint, but the feet, that's what got me. Because again, we've done you cut somebody's hands off, you don't have fingerprints. Take the head off. Well, I think that people do that because they think back to babies having their feet printed. Oh, and that there's a card out there somewhere that's going to have a footprint. And can you marry that up, with a print? Can you?
I've never seen any kind of empirical study that you couldn't. It should be unique. But I got to tell you personally, I've never been involved with a case that involved that type of footprinting. Right. Okay. Difference, when you talk about crime scene and you're talking about, well, there are footprints that are left behind. That could be shoe prints, it could be footprints, those sorts of things. But as far as using a print, and I know that it's happened, somebody's out there saying, well, that's so-and-so, he's never, worked any, I've worked these cases, we've seen hundreds of these. Okay, God bless you, go in peace. I'm glad that you have. But in my experience, I never have. And I think, but you have to admit that people think about the footprint that they take of a baby when they're little, and they're thinking that's going to be an identifiable landmark that they can go back to. Whoever this person was that's doing this, they're thinking, okay, if I decapitate them and if I take their hands and their feet, it's going to diminish the authorities' ability to get them identified. Because you know why? Because in the back of this perpetrator's mind, what they were thinking is that those hands, those feet, and that head, they now belong to me. And I'm going to have this identity. Imagine yourself as a guy that's working at the local. Well, I guess you don't have to be a volunteer, but you could be a guy that's sitting around the firehouse in rural Troup County, Georgia, and you got a call out. And this is the way the call would probably run. They might even say, we've got a brush fire on the side of the road. And maybe it did catch some stuff on fire. And, for firefighters, God bless them all. I love all the people in the fire service. I think they're genuinely the coolest people around. They roll out. Can you imagine being the kid that's on the hose and you're spritzing this thing down, and all of a sudden you see this. Here's the problem. They're not very specific about the type of bag. I'm assuming, you know what they say about assume. I'm assuming that it's a plastic bag. And you spritz this thing down, you've knocked the fire down, and then just out of curiosity, you know that this is where the fire started. Do you know how they know that, Dave? Because it's very logical. I love talking about fire and people that work I think arson investigators are some of the most incredible forensic scientists, unsung forensic scientists, by the way, out there. Wherever there's the most damage. So, and it makes sense, doesn't it? Wherever the fire has been burning the longest, that's going to be your point of origin. And you can kind of take that to the bank relative to, is it a structure or out in the field? Okay. So can you imagine being this kid that's kind of knocked this fire down, and he sees this big blob in the middle of the road. He walks over there. He might, he's got his firefighter gloves on. He's got his big boots on, and he might just bump it with his foot or maybe peel it away. And the next thing you know, you're looking at a hunk of human flesh. Can you imagine what a surprise that would be out there in rural Troup County? And Dave, this fire, according to what we're seeing, was started literally on the side of the road.
Yeah.
That tells a lot about the perpetrator here.
It does. And when I was first going over this, trying to find out everything I could, and one thing that has hit me, you're talking about your students, you realize now that a freshman coming right out of high school and going to a four-year university would have been born in 2007, 2008.
Thank you for reminding me, Dave.
I just thought I'd throw that out there because in my head, I was thinking this is a long time ago. It's a short time ago, No. Well, as you're teaching this to your students, you're going to have some going in there. Well, that's before I was born. Yeah.
Listen, let me tell you this one aside. I've got students right now that are actually thinking, former students that are actually thinking, gosh, when can I retire?
Wow. Bless your heart. Well, all right, let's get forward on this one because you do have what kind of person, okay? Because they have dumped somebody because you don't kill yourself I was trying to think, is there a possible way you could hack yourself up and at the last minute, light the match, die after this is an obvious death. And right. The very best thing would be mutilation, abuse of a corpse. You would have that. If you were to find somebody you didn't know on your property and you were trying to get rid of them kind of thing, which is so stupid. I mean, I'm just trying to think of any way possible this isn't a murder.
No, it does happen. I mean, we've had cases where people have panicked and they've had a body around. And so they've tried to get rid of the body because they don't want to be associated with it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they killed them. However, that does in fact happen.
And that's kind of why we're being very careful with the story out in L.A. with D4VD Burke.
Thank you. You're absolutely right, brother.
And so as we move forward in this one, though, it actually we come at it from the ending because, as Joe, you mentioned at the very beginning that we have had an indictment. So we do know what has taken place and we know who is accused of doing this and we know what transpired. So we know our victim, Nicole Alston. She was 24 years old when she was hacked up into pieces, her head, hands, and feet removed, and her remains, and I mean that literally, her remains were set on fire. We don't know where the head, the hands, and the feet are at this moment. I don't know if we ever will.
Right.
I would imagine the family would like to know. And you would think if anything good could come out of this, that the suspect here might say something, but to go to this, you mentioned the fire guy showing up and put out the fire first, and you go to kick the bag and you see a leg, an arm. I mean, the human arm, the human leg is going to look like nothing else.
Oh, you're absolutely right, and it's robust. It's robust as well. I mean, it's a big piece of anatomy that would be really hard to kind of disguise or hide.
You're not going to confuse this with somebody's dog.
Yeah. It's so very distinctive. And this is, I've heard some reports that have said a bag, and I've heard other reports that say bags.
Yeah, bags. There were two bags.
Okay, yeah.
According to the police report.
And, I'm thinking, well, if you've got a couple of bags and you're doing this, so it would stand to reason, since this is along a roadside, right? This means that the person wanted to put as much distance between themselves and this event as possible. I know that seems rather obvious, but just let me feed this line of logic to you here.
Okay.
I was considering.
I'm game.
So you're going to go to the trouble of, dismembering a body. You bag it up. Now we know that other pieces are missing. So the assumption would be that they are dispersed. Now, what I'm hearing right now is roughly 13 pieces, all right, that they have found, all right. So we don't know if that's concentrically contained to this location or it's in kind of an outlying area. But here's the weird thing. You go to all this trouble to do this, and then you're going to pull over on the side of the road. You're going to have to use some kind of accelerant because, as you and I have studied, for these many years now, that bodies don't burn real well. They're not great fuel. So you have to initiate this fire. So you're going to get out of your car at an intersection, take these pieces out, place them on the side of the road in plain view of anybody and everybody, douse them with an accelerant, put fire to it, get back in your car and head out. Why would you do that? Why not tromp off in the woods, even 10 yards or 20 yards and do this? And no one would be the wiser, particularly in the moment. It kind of baffles me, when I think about why this course was taken. And still to this day, we do know who the victim is. But Dave, I got to tell you, because the head's missing, we don't have a cause of death. We don't have a cause of death in this case.
So we know we've got body parts in a couple of bags that are lit on fire, and the fire department is called to come and put it out. We know it's a rural area, Troup County, Georgia. Now, the basics that we know, Joe, you're going to get called out there, and we're going to try to figure out what happened. And you really have to figure out, on top of what happened, but who is this? Because that could lead you to something. And yet, if you don't have a head, hands, feet, and you've got what's left is burned, where are you going to start with the identification process?
The only thing you can do, Dave, I would think is, you're going to, here's how it would break down. We're going to look for anything superficial that we can identify. You know what my first stop would be on this torso? Or what? Yeah, you're right on the money there. You score, man. Yeah. I'm going to look for tattoos, and I am going to see if any of them marry up with any particular style. And I'm also going to see if there are initials attached to this in any way, anything that is a specific identifier. I've had a number of cases, and I know people have got these kind of tattoos that are walking around out there, where they've had someone that they dearly loved, and they have their dearly departed's date of death, like tattooed on their arm, and it'll say, will always love you, or things like that. And you think that that's rather innocuous, but Dave, that's a piece of information I would not have had previously. I'm not saying that happened in this case, but you're going to go over every bit of this body from stem to stern to try to pick up on that. Here's the problem. Because you're talking about subjecting this body to incredible heat. I think folks would say, well, would it be possible to find a tattoo on a burned surface? My answer is yes, it would be. But this gets tedious here, because you have to literally scrape and peel through that top burned layer so that you can get down to the dermis. Now, it all depends on how badly the dermis layer is burned. Not in every case are you going to see tattoos completely burned away. A lot of it, it's all dependent upon the intensity of the fire and how long that tissue was exposed to fire as to whether or not this thing is going to curl up and disappear and vanish. That would be the first place. The other place, I'm going to look over the course of the body. Now, they're saying that we have a torso, okay? Mm-hmm. That's what's being implied, at least. No head, no hands, no feet. But if I have a torso, and I can surmise that this is a female, guess where I'm going? I'm going to the plumbing at that point in time. I'm going to see if there's a uterus. I'm going to see if there's ovaries. I'm going to see if there's any evidence that that this individual has given birth at some point in time, and there are examinations that we can do to make that determination. And I want to do a deep dive relative to that because those are specific identifiers. Any kind of plastic augmentation on the body, breast implants, anything like that. And also, here's the other thing, talking about surgeries. Fire is fire, but what can be resisted by fire are stainless steel pins, plates, surgical steel, all that stuff. So this gets really complex. The first thing you have to do is take the remains that you have, and they would have done this anyway in any kind of fire death. They're going to thoroughly x-ray this body. And if there's anything on that x-ray, that radiograph, that is radio opaque, any kind of metallic bit that's there, it's going to stand out, and you want to target that area. You have to be very specific because sometimes x-rays can be deceiving, okay? Because when you have fire remains, it's amazing, Dave. You'll see pins, buttons, zippers, all kinds of things will appear on the x-ray because the person might still be clothed or partially clothed. Clothes are not burned away. I found zippers on the backs of people when you shoot the x-ray because you couldn't really orient the thing. You didn't really know what you were looking at. All kinds of things pop up. We've even found spent projectiles in burned remains. And that's something that does happen. I've found broken knife tips in burned remains. That's why you always do an x-ray first so that you can kind of catalog the stuff as you're walking your way through it. But they would have had a monumental task on their hand. And if this was in Troup County, Georgia, her remains would not have gone to like the Troup County coroner. They don't have a coroner that would do an autopsy. Her remains would be transferred almost an hour and 45-minute drive over to GBI headquarters where they have the state medical examiner's office there. So you're not going to have like an ME investigator that's out there. You might have a GBI agent that'll show up. You'll have the coroner that's there. They're going to take a look, and then they're just going to load this into the back of the van, and they're going to take it out to GBI headquarters and do the examination out there. Dave, I was reading an article about this case, and I got to tell you, I hate to hear this term, but in the article, and I'll give credit to the article. It was written and it's posted on Law and Crime Network website. They refer to this victim, to this poor woman that lost her life. Refer to her as a cash cow. When you begin to think about what has happened with this woman, the end that she met, isn't that, it's so dehumanizing to think that it's not that the article is necessarily inaccurate. It's just the fact that that's what this poor victim had become, Dave, a cash cow. Just imagine that your family thinks that you're alive out there somewhere, but they've never made any effort to contact you or reach out. Maybe they had, but it's kind of sounding thin, to say the least. They just think that you're out there still existing in the ether somewhere, and you're not. You've been gone. You've been gone for decades now. You just poof, vanish. And then in death, you're referred to as a cash cow. How horrible is that?
I'm glad you brought that up, okay? Because I think far too often the world of crime coverage today loses some of its humanity.
Yeah.
And we forget that we're dealing with people like, okay, cash cow might be an appropriate term if you're discussing it with others in the crime world. But if you're the grandmother of the victim who didn't know, what became of their daughter, granddaughter, to see that would be shocking. It would be upsetting. And more than anything else, you don't know, they might have been burning a candle every night for the last 18 years, wondering when are we going to hear from Nicole? Why have we not heard from Nicole? So all that aside, Nicole Alston was murdered. I'm going to take that back because I don't know that she was murdered, Joe. I don't know that.
Right.
I do know that her body was dismembered and burned. And what we have learned now, and this is why I really get down to the DNA of this, Joe, because I can tell you after the fact, once the investigation was able, because they couldn't identify the remains, didn't know who it was. They did not. I say they. It isn't like we found the remains on the side of the road. We called, hey, is anybody missing somebody without a, they actually did a real investigative dive, tried to figure out what was going on here and couldn't. They didn't have what they needed to actually identify the person. Without being able to identify who it is, then you don't even know where to start with the investigation. It starts with knowing who's dead. And so they worked on it, hit a dead end. The case went cold. But as many of the cases that we have worked on over the last 499 episodes or so, DNA, genetic genealogy, the forensics actually identified the remains without hands, without feet, without a head. I'm thinking the hair that was gone. Was there any hair? Because we had a story, we had a case the other day where we were talking about hair. 3 decades old hair was an identifier. Yep. And here we don't have a head. I mean, this is really something I'm thinking, how in the world, where do you start to identify?
Well, the cool thing about this, Dave, I'm not being disrespectful about saying cool. I'm just saying from a scientific standpoint, one of the things that this is not like we have a body that's been moldering in the woods. Okay. Yeah. And we're down to skeletal remains and we don't know if we're going to be able to retrieve anything. You know that fire sometimes helps. Do you know that? And the reason
I learned that from you. I had no idea. I'm not kidding, Joe. I used to think like we did episodes of this where somebody lit a fire in a house to cover up a crime. I thought sounds like a great idea, And I remember one episode we did, and it was a long episode because I couldn't quit listening to you. I was like, dude, what? What do you mean? They set the fire to get rid of everything, and all they did was like freeze it in time.
You really do. Because, think of it this way. If you, and this is really horrible to think about, but just understand, think about it like I won't use that example. That really will put people back. But just think about something where you have the external area is burned, okay, and it's showing signs of being burned. We're talking about charring. We're talking about even the skin becoming so dehydrated that it crisps up, it's curled, that sort of thing. But guess what? The interior, to a great degree, remains intact. So this is a fresh dead person, Dave. So when they go in to examine her body, one of the things they would have done is to have collected, how can I say this? They would have collected deep muscle tissue. They could have gone into bone. They probably could have pulled out some blood in here because it's all still going to be there. And they're going to have this hanging in the background. Okay. So they're going to hold on to this biological sample. Now, we did know back during that period of time that we could hang on to things and they would have future utility. Did you know that at every autopsy we do something that's called a blood card? And there's like it looks like a felt card. It's real tiny. It's about the size of a microscopic a slide. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you take just a droplet of blood and you merely hold the dropper above it and one little drop and it goes down into the circle that's right there and you let it dry and you have that forever and ever. Amen. And it preserves it. Yeah. So you can do that. They can retain tissue and this sort of thing. So the fact that this is a fresh dead remain, that's where DNA comes into play. Remember our little girl up in Mary Simpson?
Oh yeah. Up in New York.
In New York. Dude, they had held on to her dress. They got that from Seminole, the identity of the decedent, of the perpetrator.
Right.
They got his from a seminal sample off of her dress. That's not robust over that long period of time. You get a lot of, and I'm still amazed, and kudos and a tip of the cap to those guys up there in Elmira, New York, that did this, that they were able to preserve this for so long. But with this case here, you do have fresh material to work with. The question is, how well will you preserve it? And Dave, it appears that they preserved it pretty doggone well, brother.
It's amazing that when everything was said and done, Joe, this case came down to the genetics and the forensics and identifying. And once they were able to break down the DNA, Joe, we have talked about how public sites, 23andMe,
Right.
That that people are uploading their uploading your DNA.
Yeah.
You're putting your whatever up online to find out your ancestry. Okay, look. We've talked about this, Joe, about how the government is not allowed to go and dig into these private sites. However, when you submit your sample to them, you can sign away that right and allow them being whoever you send it to allow the government to use it.
Yeah.
You can actually allow that. It's a choice. Well, in this case, a young woman uploaded her DNA to one of the ancestry sites and said, leave it open.
Wow.
She was hoping for a hit. And Joe, it took 18 years, but they got the hit. It was in 2024 they got the identification. The remains were finally identified through the DNA analysis and the genealogical research that was done after Alston's sister uploaded DNA to Ancestry site. And once they knew who she was, then they were like, well, wait a minute. She's from New York, but she had been living in Georgia. And who was she living with? She was living with Angel Thompson.
Right.
Now,
all those years.
Angel Thompson and Nicole, they were living together, and I'm trying to remember the name of the town, but it was in Georgia, and it was a small town. But Joe, in 2007, when those remains were found and unidentified, the name of Nicole continued on. Nicole Alston continued on because Angel Thompson, she went so far as to renew her driver's license, Joe. Angel Thompson renewed Nicole Alston's driver's license using Nicole's picture, but all of Thompson's personal information. Using the name Angel Thompson, Nicole Alston, Angel Thompson got food stamps. She got Section 8 housing, Social Security benefits. All told, for a number of years, Angel Thompson pretended to stole the identity of the woman, Nicole Alston, to the tune of over $200,000 in government benefits. And once they were able to get the identity of the remains, done, they were able to then track it to Thompson. And once they did, they being the investigators, they got it before a grand jury. And that's what you sent me, was this 80-count indictment. It is pretty serious, Joe.
Yeah.
But you know what? There might be an 80-count indictment. We still don't have the head, the hands, or the feet. But investigators did get an identity because they didn't stop looking.
They didn't. And every investigation, and I will say this until my dying day, every investigation always begins with identification. And we can have unidentified bodies out there, but if you cannot find out who the person is, you cannot go forward with an investigation trying to determine who their associates are that may have knowledge of their death or, in certain cases may have caused their death. And this is a perfect example of this. It took them all these many years, but once they were able, through genetics, to identify Nicole's body, it's at that point in time that the wheels went into motion. They were able to identify that someone, through just a series of horrible events, robbed this woman of who she was and has been living a lie all these many years. Now, let me tell you this. This accused has not been found guilty. Okay. This is still in the court system, but I can tell you this, Brother Dave and I are going to keep an eye on this case because it is absolutely super bizarre, and it's also a good learning tool, I think, for us all. We know, and this is what's important, that as investigators, there is always hope. There is always hope that at some point in time, some piece will fall into place, that some bit of data that we've overlooked will lead us in the right direction. And you never know. You never know. We might even wind up with the location of the rest of her body, and hopefully we'll find out what her cause of death was. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.